So we have a potential conflict going on in the Middle East, whether it's a conflict military wise, whether it's humanitarian aid. And if you're in the public sector and you're looking at spending and you have a business that is selling to the government, then we have to look at current events and take that into consideration when we're building out our plans and looking at how we're selling to the government and what they're buying. It's actually very important. And it's a very important part about selling in the public sector. And what I'm going to focus on today is less about, in fact, none of this is going to be focused on weapon spending. It's going to be focused on how does non-weapon spending, or how is non-weapon spending affected in times of conflict? And it's quite significant, actually. We recently did a newsletter that we put out on LinkedIn. And if we're not connected on LinkedIn, feel free to connect with us there. So looking back at past conflicts, and if you've watched the channel, you know we are a big fan of the data, right? So I don't get emotional when I'm putting a sales plan together for a company selling to the government. What I do is I look at the data. And this is the biggest advantage we have. How does the government buy? How much do they spend? What offices are buying? What are they buying? We can see it all. We can see what they're forecasting, right? And so with all of the roadblocks and the hurdles with government contracting, the fact that we can see all of this data is very clearly the big advantage that we have. And in times of conflict, the government spends a significant amount of money in things that are not related to weapons. Now, sure, weapons spending goes out. And by the way, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen in the Middle East, but I do know things, the heat's turning up, and whether it's there or somewhere else, there's always a conflict. So we want to analyze, hey, what is going to happen and what types of spending do we think could be increasing here as this particular conflict kind of plays out? So aside from the missiles and the things that most of the media outlets are talking about here, I want to focus on kind of the maybe not so cool or interesting things, but in some cases, it's the biggest spend. Things like logistics, right? Things like planning, things like how we're going to be transporting, if it's transportation in troops. That could also result in things like fuel, right? So going back to our newsletter that we put out here, we took a look at Desert Storm going back just 30, 40 years. God, how old am I now? Right. These conflicts just seem to keep adding up and they never really stop, do they? But so $7 billion just in logistics contracts in Desert Storm. What does that mean for you, right? As a government contractor, how do you even interpret that? Well, we can do a few things, right? The first thing, of course, you always got to bring it back to, if you're working for a company, what are they selling? If it's your business, what is your business engaged in right now? But you may have a niche or a niche that emerges out of an event that's unfolding overseas, right? So as we watch what's happening, are we going to see U.S. military troops moving? Are we going to see maybe an increase in humanitarian aid? And this is one a lot of people actually don't think about, is what is the small business role in humanitarian aid, right? And maybe this is a less controversial topic to talk about, maybe not with the NGOs, but for instance, right now, what's happening, we're seeing an increase in private companies providing humanitarian aid overseas in countries that need help. And most recently, we have a video coming out next week on a couple of veteran-owned businesses that are in the news for providing humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip and in South Sudan. If I have my facts right, this could be an emerging trend, right? Meaning private companies providing this type of aid versus your typical NGO providing that type of aid. Now, if you're a business that can provide that type of logistical support, there could be something for you here, right? So, it's supporting our country, and it's also potentially helping when we're talking about humanitarian aid, others in partner nations. What other types of spending, or non-weapon spending, I should say, are we looking at in times of crisis? Well, The U.S. has spent more than $1 trillion since 2003 strengthening homeland security. So things like emergency systems, protecting our borders, upgrading buildings, helping local agencies just get the right tools to do their jobs, right? So I also think about the Defense Logistics Agency. And by the way, guys, as I go on here, if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them right in the chat here. I'm going to put something out there right now. Let's see if that goes out. Great. By the way, happy Friday, everybody. Maybe not the happiest topic. Happy Friday. I hope everyone's about ready to have an awesome weekend here. But, as we talk about the different types of spending that the government's involved in when conflict arises, we also see, spending with more product related and service related spending. Think about just COVID, right? Now, if I go back and I take a look at the US federal spending during COVID, where do I see a surge in spending? Well, I see things like surgical items, plastic gloves, face masks. There's a huge sine wave. So, like, we look at it, there's a huge hill, and at the very top of the hill, right, during the really, when COVID was really in the middle of everything there, we see a huge amount of spending in that type of item, a lot of pharmaceuticals. And of course, there's the big contracts with the big, vaccine manufacturers and whatnot. But for the small businesses, it was much more on the, surgical, medical devices, gloves, masks, and whatnot. But, when the government surges or goes to support something, we got to keep in mind that there's a long tail, a long logistics tail that the military, for instance, leaves behind. So we have training, right? We have food. They all have to stay somewhere. There's transportation that takes them from point A to point B. Things like communications, cybersecurity, all of these things could be affected. And, in the past couple months, there has been a lot of concern with people either interested in going into government contracting or people in government contracting because we saw DOGE going through the federal agencies. And my point then was exactly the same as it is now, which is unfortunate for especially the federal employees that had to deal with the burden of that, because organization like DOGE can go through and start eliminating some of the job positions, but what ends up happening is the actual work doesn't get eliminated, right? The work in a lot of these agencies were spread thin as it was. And so now you're creating more work for fewer people. And when we're talking about reducing federal spending, as I said back then, it's a lot easier to talk about that than it is to do it. We already know we're going to spend more next year than we were this year. And that's just the way it works. It is so difficult to actually reduce spending. And then we add conflict to that, right? And now we're going to have additional opportunities and additional spending. So again, for the business owner, for somebody in government contracting, keeping an eye on where we're going here could be very important for your business. Now I have, let's see here. All right. Oh, one question, Rick, do you see anything as far as regular tools? So I got a question about tools, and do I think that's going to see an increase? That really just depends, right? What I would actually do is I would take a look at, I don't know what kind of tools you sell, but I would look at the tools that you sell, and I would look at the spending, USA spending, past spending. What are we seeing there? We're seeing an increase year over year. And, is it automotive tools? Are you selling tools related to aircraft? And I'd also get an idea of what the average business is making that's selling those type of tools. And all that data is publicly available. And that's exactly what you're going to want to see. Now, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen here over the next few weeks, over the next year, but I do know that whether it's this or something else, conflicts are going to arise, and the U.S. involvement will be significant in some areas and not in other events as they come to pass. So we want to keep a sharp eye on that. And we can also look at how the political messages coming out from the administration could affect federal spending here 6 months down the line, a year down the line. Now, sometimes we don't see the spending reported in USA spending.gov, for instance, there's going to be a delay there. So we can't just rely on looking at past spending. We are going to have to look at future spending as well. And we're going to take current events like this into account, right? And there are other events going on right now that we can look at, such as, what's going on with GSA, right? Now, GSA has been pushed by executive order and by memos from the Secretary of Defense, for instance, where we would be utilizing GSA to a higher degree than we normally would be, right? So I saw some that said, hey, they're going to be the central procurement arm of the entire federal government, which most of the federal agencies don't want that anyway. And I would say that before the manning was cut, they still didn't have the capacity to do something like that. So now what we're seeing is probably an increase in the use of GSA in, I'd say, non-mission essential, non-military essential related items and products. And of course, we can go back and look at the percentage of spending that is going through a organization like GSA or the GSA schedules. We could see, hey, for accounting services, what was it? Was it 5%, 10%? For pharmaceutical supplies or office supplies, was it 80%? If we're seeing those high percentages, we know GSA is used significantly there anyway. And if it's being pushed, that could increase, right? So we want to approach our business and selling to the public sector with our eyes open. We can use the past and just like with conflict, we can use the past to see what was actually spent. And we can use that to make a good determination of where we should focus our time and our money and our attention, right? So we'll see with GSA. Now, one of the other things and I put a post out about this and a video recently. By the way, you can check out our YouTube channel at GovClose. Just go to YouTube and hit GovClose over there. But we were talking about how GSA was essentially eliminating the middleman, if you will. What they were really discussing in a couple of letters that have come out from GSA was working more directly with the primes, and especially I should say significantly, they're pointing out, why can't we work directly with the prime contractors? Why do we need a reseller, right? Or a middleman? Some would refer to them as a middleman. Some would refer to them as a value-added reseller. Think Carahsoft. All right, so Carahsoft is a company that resells things like software, and they would hold multiple contract vehicles like NASA SOUP, like GSA, and they would take care of some of the contracting paperwork between a small business and a government agency. Now, what a lot of small businesses don't get in those cases is they think when they partner with Carahsoft's going to do a lot of the selling for them. That's just not the case. And the same thing's true if you're a business that's looking at getting a GSA schedule or you're competing to be on a NASA SOUP. Going on to one of those vehicles is a lot of work, but it doesn't guarantee you're going to make any money, right? That just gives the government an option to buy from you. And so you want to do your research and really understand how the government's buying before you make the decision and commit the resources to grabbing one of those vehicles. When we look at what's going to happen here, whether it's in the Middle East or elsewhere, could be also looking at Ukraine, understanding where the government's putting its money and where the trends are going. It could help you as a business owner understand where you should be looking. For instance, I would be telling most of my clients that you should be looking at the Department of Defense over the next couple of years, as they already have a projected increase in spending. And then when we add things like conflicts to that, which we are seeing right now, it could increase the spending even more. And in order for you to be able to contribute and to bring in some revenue for your business, we have to be ahead of things like solicitations, right? So we want to make sure that we understand what the government's requirements are as early as possible. And that's why this is so important. So really the thesis of this video, this live stream, is just to talk to those out there that are looking at government contracting and make sure we are looking at current events and trying to read the tea leaves as to where the spending is going and how that can affect our business. Lots going on. Hope all you guys are going to have a great weekend. I'm going to end this one a little bit early today. Check out GovClose. If you're not on YouTube right now, check out the GovClose YouTube website. Check out our newsletter on LinkedIn. You can connect with us there, and we'll see you next time.
After going through the course, I was able to land a client that pays me a monthly retainer to actually help them develop their business and go after these federal contracts.
I was able to get a consulting gig with a software company that currently works with the intelligence community.
Within 2 months, I had my first client. So the initial contract was for a 3-month contract for $4,000 a month.
So 27 years old, you've never worked in government contracting, you've never worked as a consultant, and you just closed your first deal, is that correct?
That's fair. And I've got a couple small projects on the side as well. So definitely something, probably my best investment I've made all year.
A cold call landed a 9-figure government contract.
Start a consulting business and a high salaried position as a account executive in public sales. So you're doing both of those things.
I'm living the best of both worlds right now.
So my name is Mike Knickerbocker. I am a naval officer that's getting ready to retire. Right now, I have 3 firm clients and 2 more perspectives. I'm able to provide value across different industries because the skill set that I learned through the course and was able to apply my own experience.
GovClose came and it was a no-brainer. I wanted some secret sauce.
This has allowed me to live in Germany. It's a little hazy today, but we can do that. You see?
Oh yeah, dude, that's beautiful.
The content, the training, it's invaluable. It's written.
And Deb, what motivated you to join the GovClose certification program?
Wow. Well, I think that wanting to work with a leader in the field, someone who understands government contracting on a deep basis and has the reputation, the experience working with you and your company was a natural.
The students that graduate our program, they go on to start their own consulting firms, winning high dollar consulting clients. They go on to land high-paying salaried positions as account executives with companies that sell to the government. I'm so proud of the people that have gone through our program. And if you are considering either a job or a business, and by the way, some of our students are doing both, as I did. They're running a consulting business and they'll have an account executive job. It's transforming their lives. It's bringing true wealth to them and their families. Back to the video.